What if I told you that everything you think you know about World War I is only a fraction of what really happened? History books can tell you the dates. They can list the battles, the generals, and the number of lives lost. But they can never tell you what it actually felt like to stand there, to breathe the same air, to hear the first gunshot that changed the world forever. I know that because I was there, or at least, that's where my journey begins. The machine wasn't supposed to work. For years, people laughed at the idea of traveling through time. Scientists called it impossible. Friends called me obsessed. But on one cold night, surrounded by humming wires and glowing instruments, I flipped a single switch and the impossible became reality. A blinding flash swallowed everything around me. The room disappeared. The noise stopped. For a few terrifying seconds, I couldn't even tell if I was alive. Then, silence. When I opened my eyes, I wasn't in the 21st century anymore. The smell hit me first. Coal smoke, horse manure, fresh bread from nearby bakeries. The air felt heavier, cleaner in some ways, but filled with something impossible to describe. I looked around. Horse-drawn carriages rolled beside shiny new automobiles. Men wore elegant suits and hats. Women walked through crowded streets carrying umbrellas instead of smartphones. Children laughed without any idea that their entire future was about to be destroyed. A newspaper vendor shouted today's headline, June 28, 1914, Sarajevo. My heart nearly stopped. I knew exactly what day it was. Only a few minutes from now, one assassination would ignite the deadliest conflict humanity had ever witnessed up to that point. I started running. The streets were packed with people waiting for the royal procession. Some smiled, others waved little flags. Nobody looked afraid. Why would they? To them, it was just another public appearance. To me, it was the beginning of hell. I finally reached the crowd surrounding a narrow street. People whispered excitedly. Then I saw him, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne. He looked surprisingly ordinary, not like the giant historical figure I'd imagined. Just a man riding in an open-top car beside his wife, Sophie. History often feels larger than life. Reality rarely does. As the motorcade rolled forward, something strange happened. Confusion spread through the crowd. One of the conspirators had already attempted an attack with a grenade. It failed. The Archduke survived. For a brief moment, it seemed history had changed. Could this really be happening? Had my arrival somehow altered the timeline? My pulse raced. Maybe millions of people could still be saved. But history has a terrifying way of correcting itself. Later that day, after a wrong turn by the car, fate placed Franz Ferdinand directly in front of 19-year-old Gavrilo Princip, only a few feet away. 2 gunshots, that's all it took. The first bullet struck Sophie, the second hit Franz Ferdinand. Within minutes, both were dead. The crowd screamed. Some people froze. Others ran in every direction. I couldn't move because I knew those 2 gunshots weren't just killing 2 people. They were killing an entire generation. Standing there, I realized something terrifying. Wars don't usually begin with explosions. They begin with decisions, conversations, pride, fear, and alliances that slowly pull nation after nation into a disaster nobody truly controls. Over the next few weeks, Europe transformed before my eyes. Austria-Hungary blamed Serbia, Russia mobilized, Germany backed Austria, France backed Russia, Britain prepared for the inevitable. It was like watching thousands of dominoes fall in perfect order. Each government believed the war would be short. Many soldiers believed they'd be home before Christmas. Crowds gathered in city squares, cheering as young men boarded trains. Bands played patriotic songs. Families waved goodbye with smiles instead of tears. Some volunteers even lied about their age just to enlist. Nobody imagined what modern industrial warfare would actually become. Watching those trains leave was one of the hardest moments of my journey because I knew something they didn't. Many of those smiling young men would never return home, not because they lacked courage, but because the world had invented weapons far deadlier than its leaders could understand. As I followed the advancing armies across Europe, another shocking realization struck me. This wasn't the kind of war shown in old paintings. There were no glorious cavalry charges deciding the outcome. Technology had changed everything. Machine guns could fire hundreds of rounds every minute. Heavy artillery could destroy entire villages from miles away. Barbed wire stretched across the landscape like endless steel spiderwebs. Airplanes, still a new invention, were already spying on enemy positions. Humanity had entered the modern age, but compassion had not kept pace with invention. Within months, both sides dug into the ground. The front lines stopped moving. The earth itself became their home. Thousands of miles of trenches scarred Europe from the North Sea, all the way to Switzerland. When I finally climbed into one, I understood why survivors rarely spoke about it for the rest of their lives. Nothing could have prepared me for what I was about to witness. The moment my boots touched the muddy floor of the trench, the smell nearly knocked me over. Rotting wood, wet earth, smoke, sweat, and something much worse. Death. No documentary, no history book, no movie had ever prepared me for this. The trenches weren't simply long ditches in the ground. They were entire underground worlds, miles and miles of narrow passageways reinforced with wooden planks, barely wide enough for two soldiers to pass each other. Every step was a struggle. The mud clung to my boots as if it wanted to pull me underground forever. Some places were flooded with freezing water. Others were filled with rats, not small rats, huge ones, fed by endless supplies of discarded food and human remains. One soldier noticed me staring. Without saying a word, he pointed toward the darkness. At first, I couldn't understand what he meant. Then, I saw dozens of glowing eyes, hundreds of rats scattered through the trench walls. Some were as large as cats. The soldiers barely reacted. They had learned to live with them, or perhaps there was no other choice. Sleep was almost impossible, even during the quietest nights. Artillery shells exploded somewhere in the distance. The ground never truly stopped. Shaking, every loud sound made everyone instinctively duck, because the next explosion could land directly on top of them. I spoke with a young British soldier. He couldn't have been older than 18. He showed me a photograph of his family, his mother, his younger sister, his dog. He smiled while looking at the picture. Then he folded it carefully and placed it back inside his jacket. "I'll see them by Christmas," he said confidently. I wanted to tell him the truth. I wanted to warn him that the war would continue for years, that millions more would die, but I couldn't. History had already chosen its path. The next morning, before sunrise, whistles echoed across the trenches. Every soldier immediately stood. No one needed instructions. They already knew what was coming, over the top. 3 simple words, perhaps the most terrifying words any soldier could hear. One by one, they climbed wooden ladders. Then they ran, straight into open ground. Within seconds, machine guns erupted. The sound was unlike anything I had ever heard, not individual gunshots, a continuous metallic roar. Bullets sliced through the air faster than my eyes could follow. Men who had been laughing together only moments earlier disappeared into clouds of dirt and smoke. Some fell instantly, others kept crawling despite horrific injuries. The battlefield became chaos. There was almost nowhere to hide. This narrow strip of land between the opposing trenches had a name, no man's land. And now I understood why. Trees had been reduced to black splinters. The ground was covered with shell craters, filled with rainwater, broken helmets, destroyed equipment, and countless reminders of battles that had ended days or weeks earlier. Hours later, the survivors slowly returned to the trench. Many came back carrying wounded friends. Many came back alone. Some never came back at all. I realized something heartbreaking. Victory wasn't measured in miles. Sometimes an entire day's battle gained only a few hundred feet at the cost of thousands of lives. Then came one of the darkest moments of the entire war. A soldier suddenly shouted a warning. Gas! Panic spread instantly. Every man reached for a strange-looking mask hanging from his belt. Some put them on within seconds. Others weren't fast enough. A thick yellow-green cloud drifted silently across the battlefield. It looked almost harmless, beautiful, even, until it reached the trenches. Those without masks began coughing violently. Some collapsed immediately. Others clawed desperately at their throats, unable to breathe. Their eyes burned, their lungs filled with poisonous chemicals. Watching it unfold was one of the most horrifying experiences of my journey. The gas didn't care whether you were brave. It didn't care about rank or nationality. It simply kept moving wherever the wind carried it. Yet even in the middle of unimaginable horror, humanity refused to disappear completely. One cold December night in 1914, something incredible happened. The gunfire slowly faded. Then, someone started singing. At first, only one voice echoed across the darkness. Soon another answered, then another. Within hours, soldiers from opposite sides cautiously climbed out of their trenches. Enemies, men who had spent months trying to kill each other, now standing face to face. They exchanged cigarettes, chocolate, buttons from their uniforms. Some even shared photographs of their families. Others played soccer on the frozen ground. For a brief moment, the war simply stopped. History remembers it as the Christmas Truce, a reminder that ordinary people often have far less hatred than the government sending them to war. Unfortunately, the peace didn't last. The following morning, commanders ordered everyone back into position. The shooting resumed, as if nothing had happened. As I continued traveling across the front, I realized the war wasn't fought only by soldiers. Millions of horses carried supplies through impossible terrain. Dogs delivered messages between trenches. Carrier pigeons flew through storms of bullets to save entire units. One pigeon named Cher Ami reportedly delivered a crucial message despite being badly wounded, helping rescue nearly 200 trapped American soldiers. It was astonishing. Even animals had become unwilling participants in humanity's greatest tragedy. By now, one question haunted my mind. If this was already beyond imagination, what horrors were still waiting ahead? The deeper I traveled into the final years of the war, the more it felt as though the entire world had forgotten what peace looked like. Cities were exhausted. Families waited for letters that would never arrive. Hospitals overflowed with wounded soldiers. By 1917, everything began to change. The United States entered the war, bringing fresh troops and supplies to the Allied forces. I watched young American soldiers arrive in Europe. Some looked confident, others looked terrified. None of them truly understood what awaited them. The war had become a contest of endurance. Who could survive longer? Who would run out of resources first? In 1918, massive offensives shook the Western Front. Artillery thundered without pause. Villages vanished. Forests became fields of shattered stumps. Even nature seemed to disappear. Yet amid the destruction, acts of courage continued every day. Medics risked their lives to save strangers. Nurses refused to abandon the wounded. Ordinary people displayed extraordinary bravery. Eventually, Germany could no longer continue. Its economy was collapsing. Its people were starving. Its allies were falling. Then, on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, 1918, the guns finally fell silent. Some soldiers cried. Others simply stood in silence, unable to believe the nightmare was over. But while the fighting had ended, the scars remained. Millions returned home with injuries that would last a lifetime. Others carried invisible wounds that no one yet understood. More than 20 million people had lost their lives. Entire empires collapsed. Borders were redrawn. The world had changed forever. And perhaps the greatest tragedy was that this war failed to become the last. The peace that followed left deep resentment across Europe, helping set the stage for an even greater conflict only 2 decades later, World War II. As my mission came to an end, I activated the time machine one last time. The battlefield faded, the smoke disappeared. Moments later, I was back where I had started. Everything around me was the same, but I winced. After witnessing the First World War with my own eyes, history no longer felt like words in a book. It became faces, voices, dreams that never had the chance to come true, and one lesson stayed with me above all others. Peace is fragile. far more fragile than most of us realize. Thank you for traveling through history with me. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and join me on our next adventure through time. Until then, take care and never forget the price that history has already paid.